A young black woman was suddenly dragged through a courthouse lobby for no reason, treated as if she didn't belong. The officer behind it, Brian Keller, acted with pure arrogance, certain his authority would silence everyone around him. But Danielle Carter had one hidden move that turned the entire scene upside down. And just wait until you hear how this shocking confrontation ended, with justice delivered in the most unforgettable way. The courthouse lobby in downtown Atlanta buzzed with the usual mix of lawyers, clerks, and citizens finishing their hearings. The echo of footsteps and muffled conversations filled the high-ceilinged hall. But the rhythm broke in an instant. Officer Brian Keller, broad-shouldered, flushed with impatience, a man known among staff for losing his temper too quickly, spotted someone who, to him, stood out. At the far side of the benches sat a young black woman, Danielle Carter. She was composed, almost understated, a plain navy suit, her hair pulled neatly back, a slim leather folder resting in her hands. She had just finished speaking quietly to a clerk, nothing unusual, nothing disruptive. And yet, Keller's eyes narrowed. To him, she was not a citizen waiting for paperwork, she was a problem. His strides echoed louder than the rest as he cut across the lobby, each step carrying a charge of hostility. Without a word of warning, he reached for her wrist. The snap of movement was sharp, jarring, out of place in a building meant for order and law. He yanked her up from the bench with one swift pull, spinning her toward the exit doors. His voice rang out, harsh and commanding. "You don't belong here. Get outside before I throw you out myself." The room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Papers slipped from hands. A silence heavier than stone pressed over the lobby as every eye turned. The sheer suddenness of it all, the aggression, the humiliation, the lack of reason, felt unreal. People stared, caught between disbelief and outrage, as if the entire hall had been yanked into a moment none of them expected to witness. Danielle stumbled from the force of Keller's pull, the heel of her shoe skidding against the marble floor. For a brief second, the entire lobby expected her to fall, but she didn't. She straightened, smoothed her sleeve with one hand, and looked directly at him. Her face was calm, her breathing steady, but her eyes held the steel of someone who refused to be broken. "Sir, let go of me," she said. Not a shout, not a plea, a statement, firm, measured, undeniable. The words carried across the lobby, not because they were loud, but because they were unshakably controlled. People who heard them felt something shift inside, admiration for her poise, shame for their own silence. Danielle's gaze swept the room. She wasn't searching for a hero. She knew none would step forward. She was taking mental note of every face turned toward her, every witness who might later recall what they saw. She had learned long ago that sometimes the only defense you have is the truth recorded in the eyes of strangers. The onlookers stirred uneasily. A middle-aged woman in a gray coat pressed a hand to her mouth. A young man with a briefcase lowered his eyes to the floor, unable to meet Danielle's stare. From somewhere in the back, whispers floated forward like ripples. She didn't do anything. Why is he dragging her like that? She was just waiting. The lobby seemed to shrink under the weight of the moment. People clutched folders tighter to their chests. Some shifted from foot to foot, torn between the instinct to intervene and the fear of becoming the next target of Keller's temper. Their compassion was real. It showed in their eyes, in the way their bodies leaned ever so slightly toward Danielle. But their hesitation was just as powerful. And in that hesitation, the scene grew heavier. Here was a woman, neatly dressed, holding nothing but a leather folder, being treated as though she were a trespasser. She had broken no law, spoken no threat, raised no voice. Her presence alone had been judged as unacceptable. And though the crowd ached with sympathy, none dared step past the invisible line drawn by Keller's authority. Danielle felt it all, the whispers, the stares, the painful stillness of bystanders who cared but would not move. And yet she stood taller. Each second she held her composure, she transformed silent compassion into silent testimony. She was no longer just a woman being humiliated. She was the center of a moral test for everyone in that lobby, a test most were already failing. Keller shoved Danielle back, her shoulder striking the cold courthouse wall. His grip tightened, fingers pressing hard as if he needed to prove control. The veins at his temple pulsed, his voice booming across the lobby. "I said get out! You think you can talk back in my courthouse?" The words weren't just aimed at Danielle. They were a performance, a declaration to everyone present that he, and only he, commanded the space. His tone dripped with contempt, not simply for her as a person, but for what she represented: quiet strength in the face of his authority. But something shifted. The compassion that had filled the crowd moments before began hardening into anger. Faces tightened, jaws clenched. A man near the benches muttered under his breath, "This is too much." Another shook his head slowly, fists curling at his sides. And then came a small, defiant act. A woman near the entrance pulled out her phone, raising it to record. The red in Keller's face deepened. He saw the camera, saw the eyes fixed on him, and for a split second his authority trembled. Yet instead of loosening his grip, he doubled down, barking louder. "Put that phone away unless you want trouble too." A ripple of outrage passed through the hall. No one moved, but everyone felt it, a current running beneath the silence. The marble floor reflected the tension like static in the air, heavy enough to make breathing difficult. It felt as though the entire lobby was holding its breath, outrage simmering just below the surface. Every person watching knew the line had been crossed, but fear kept them frozen. All except Danielle. Her posture remained straight, her breathing calm. To an outside eye, she might have looked cornered, but inside, her mind was steady, calculating. She wasn't panicking, she was waiting. Timing mattered. And in that pause between Keller's rage and the crowd's silence, Danielle prepared to reveal the one thing he never expected. Danielle drew in a slow, steady breath. The tension that had gripped the lobby hung for one last heartbeat. Then she moved. With practiced precision, she twisted her wrist free from Keller's grasp. In the same motion, she flipped open the leather folder she had held so tightly. The polished badge inside caught the fluorescent light, gleaming like a blade cutting through the silence. Her voice followed, sharp as steel and cold with authority. "Special Agent Danielle Carter, FBI, release me now." The effect was immediate. Gasps rippled through the lobby like a wave. A murmur rose, disbelief, awe, even a few stifled chuckles at the sheer audacity of what had just unfolded. In an instant, the predator had become the fool. Keller froze. The fiery red in his face drained to ash. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The same hand that had yanked Danielle across the room now hung awkwardly at his side, trembling, exposed. For the first time, he was silent, and the silence was deafening. Two courthouse deputies rushed forward, voices sharp, demanding explanations. Their questions tangled in the air, but Danielle didn't flinch, didn't move an inch. She simply stood tall, her presence commanding, her authority undeniable. The lobby transformed. Where moments before there had been fear and outrage, now there was something else, a surge of satisfaction. Witnesses exchanged glances, their eyes wide with the realization that justice had flipped the scene upside down. The man who had barked orders, who had humiliated her in front of dozens, now stood stripped of his power, not by force, but by truth revealed at the perfect moment. Keller's shoulders sagged as the deputies closed in. His bravado was gone, swallowed whole by the badge he could not challenge. Danielle's calm victory was absolute. Not only had she defended herself, she had turned his cruelty into his undoing. As the crowd watched him being led away, a thought settled over every witness like a final verdict. Sometimes the strongest weapon against arrogance is not resistance, but patience, and the courage to reveal the truth when it matters most.